Well, let's talk now to David Bauerlein of the Florida Times Union. Thanks for joining us tonight. And David, you've been covering the story about the possible sale of JEA, and the twists and turns just don't seem to stop. On Friday, your paper reported the process to sell or privatize JEA is actually on pause now. So what have you learned about exactly what is on hold and why?
So what's on hold is a very important part of the process, which is the work of the negotiating committee. Those are the team of JEA executives who are actually going to be leading the agency and negotiating with all these interested entities in a potential privatization deal. And they're going to be looking at a lot of different terms and conditions of a potential privatization deal. One of the things that they could be looking at is what kind of benefits there might be for top executives at JEA in the event of a privatization deal, and then those executives no longer continue to work for the utility, kind of a golden parachutes type thing. So the issue is it a conflict of interest for those negotiators to be, in effect, negotiating on something that would provide some financial benefit for them personally? So the utility has asked the State Ethics Commission to weigh in, and until we get a ruling, we really don't know how that affects their role as negotiators.
And let's talk money. Just for example, what would be one of those golden parachute amounts?
Well, the issue would be that they could possibly get months of consulting contracts after a sale goes through, for instance. And so they would no longer be working full-time at the utility, but they would be hired on as consultants to provide expertise. So it could be 6 months of pay, and when you look at all their dozen top executives, you could be adding up to several $1 million of consulting contracts that would be coming to them if that were actually a part of the final terms and conditions of a deal.
Now, this has come up recently. In fact, just this weekend, you all reported JEA has begun mailing out brochures with customers' bills. And then there's a warning. When you open up your bill, it says, watch out, you could see a sharp rate hike. And I believe your article said even more than 50%. So if your bill is, say, $100 now, your JEA bill, it could be $150. Now, some people are calling this a scare tactic. What have you found out?
Well, sure. If you look at your bill, you go, okay, I'm paying $100, 50% more. That means I'm going to pay $150. So you go, wow, that's a big hit on my pocketbook. Well, the issue is that there is a study by JEA that does, in fact, look at raising rates by 52%, base rates for electric, by that amount through 2030. However, that particular scenario does not include any deep cuts in their workforce. It doesn't include cuts in spending. So there is another scenario which JEA really says is the scenario they would follow, which has a substantially lower increase in rates, along with a combination of other cost-cutting measures. So the issue for the scare tactic charge is that JEA is basically sending out to ratepayers this information that makes them think really their cost is going to be skyrocketing, and that will then make customers more open, receptive to a change, which is what JEA says is needed, to a privatization model where the city sells the utility.
Now, David, your reports have obviously gotten the attention of JEA, and they are now putting out these emails with the title Myths versus Facts, suggesting that some of your reports are inaccurate or perhaps misleading. What can you tell us about that pushback that you are getting from JEA?
Well, it's not just us. Other media outlets are getting it too. It's a very unusual tactic for an entity to put out public rebuttals like that. I can only say that for us, we stood by our stories. If an error is made, we'll correct it. But their information is out there. If people want to see what the myths and facts are that JEA says are out there and compare them to what's actually in our stories, we encourage that kind of scrutiny, and we're happy to see that kind of engagement from our readers. The people are very interested in JEA, and we think we're doing an accurate job of reporting what's happening.
And you mentioned the high interest in the story, the customers, of course, and the employees. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen. So what can we expect in the days ahead, David?
Well, I'm not sure. Well, obviously the State Ethics Commission is going to be a big issue. How would they rule? How will that affect the negotiations? City Council is going to be meeting later this month in their ongoing workshops. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of reaction City Council members have, because they felt cut out of this process all along, and what kind of reaction they may have to what's happening with the JEA sales process. So stay tuned for what happens with that.
David, thank you so much for your time and your insight. That's David Bauerlein from the Florida Times Union, and you can read his work in the paper or online at jacksonville.com.